Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of OpsCast, brought to you by marketingops.com, powered by all the Mo pros out there. I'm your host, Michael Hartmann, flying solo once again as we creep ever closer to Mopsapalooza 2025. Today, my guest is Ellie Cary, Senior Demand Gen Manager at StarTree. We're talking about what happens when marketing teams hit their MQL goals yet still get cut. Ellie joins us to explore the growing demand for ROI visibility in marketing, how attribution and reporting often fall short, and what MOPS leaders can do to make their impact more visible and strategic. So, Ellie, welcome back to the show.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hey, it's good to
yeah.
be here. Oh, sorry, we're good.
All right, this is real life, folks. We got stuff going on, things flying around. All right, well, let's start with a bit of your background. I know we covered this a little bit in the episode we did recently with all the other women that were joined us. But can you walk us through? Now we have a little more time. Your career path and how you got into demand gen and marketing ops.
Yeah, so I think really I'm a problem solver and a creative at heart, and I found a great career in marketing where just like I think a lot of people in our space, I started in web, went into social, started to expand that experience into email, paid, then omnichannel marketing. Where I've been the last couple of years though is marketing ops and rev ops or go to market motions. And over my career, I've probably seen 50 plus marketing orgs because I've worked in-house and agency. I've touched B2C, B2B, small business, SaaS, enterprise. I had a client for pump systems. So I've done a lot of different things, which has been really cool. But I think one of the biggest eye-opening moments in my career is I was in a role for a SaaS startup, and we had an open room concept where we had everyone together in what I love to call the
Mm-hmm.
pit. Um, and we had, so what was really interesting to me is we had marketing, we had sales, we had customer success. We all were in the same room, literally on top of each other, but nobody was really talking to the other one about how we were doing things and marching together as a team. It was the most bizarre being in a silo without being in a silo moment that I've ever
Everybody
had,
had
I think.
headphones on like this.
Yeah, everyone had headphones on, and but like everybody was in cubicles right next to each other. And it was an eye opener for me because there was a lot of data breakdowns, like field mapping issues. But what was more strange was nobody was talking about pipeline together and revenue together. And I think that was the first time in my career where I really said, I think I want to be able to look at this holistically from start to finish. And I really want to see how the things work and how they all tie together to follow the money, because I do really like to follow the money or show me
Right.
the money, like
That's
Jerry
right.
Maguire says.
Yeah. Interesting. I've never been a fan of those pit things. It like so my wife
Yeah.
there's a place my wife worked, which is a brain research place here in Dallas, and there's been studies that show that those kinds of environments are actually terrible for people to be able to get work done. Um, yeah, so thankfully I've never really been in one where that was forced upon me, but like I know the idea is to build connections and things like that, but I think your example is evidence that like it actually people try to get around it and sort of focus in, whether it's using headphones like I'm wearing now or whatever, right? They go in, usually you have some sort of space where you can go and close a room or whatever, but I'm sure that's like it. Maybe it's just a symptom of our age where people feel like they're connected more than ever, but not really like human connection.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No. And that's probably why I love working at home now, remote, because I get
I, I
a lot
miss
more done.
being in an office. I really do. So I'm that guy, but I don't miss commutes. That definitely.
Yeah. I joke that I'm fully feral and I own it and I love it. So,
Fully
yeah.
feral.
Yeah.
Okay, that I like that
Yeah.
alliteration. All right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've talked about, and we're going to be going into a little bit, is that you recently went through a tough restructuring too, right? Um,
Mhm.
so first off, thanks for sharing this. But can you talk about what happened in a general sense, probably, and what it revealed about um, I guess maybe how you believe that marketing's performance impact, whatever is measured for most organizations, and what you learn from that.
Yeah, so I think, and actually, I was thinking about this and reflecting on it. I don't feel like this is uncommon. And this is the second org where I started a role, and then within the quarter, there was a riff, usually a significant one, a big org shakeup and restructuring. And I'm really fortunate in that I'm the last man standing, quote unquote, you know. But I think what the org made a really executive good decision where they're thinking about not just today but tomorrow. And I think a lot of businesses have to think about that. And we've seen this trend over time, right? Where, like, I think it was December 2023 or winter 2023, where there were a lot of layoffs across the tech
Yeah.
org, right? And there's kind of this cadence where you see certain time frames, you have these kind of things happening where the business is planning for how are we sustaining today? How are we hitting our numbers? How are we going to project what we're doing next year from now, next 2 years from now? And so they have to take a hard look about performance and make executive decisions. And I was in this boat where they did the exact same thing. A couple quarters went by, you know, certain metrics we needed to hit. And the reality is, what was really surreal about this is marketing was hitting their numbers. We were hitting our MQLs. We were, you know, doing really cool stuff. We had cool events. But I think what it really boiled down to is we were hitting those numbers, but how much were we spending to hit those numbers was a really critical number that I think leadership was looking at, and rightly so. But I don't know if the marketing team was really looking at it the
So
same
that
way.
surprises me,
And
but
so,
I think you're right. It's not that unusual.
yeah. Well, but I think, like, from an executive, you have, you know, your CMOs, they look at that. They have nightmares about that, right? But your people that are your doers and in the weeds of the, you know, programs and things that you're doing, they don't exactly have direct line of sight into that. And that's where following the money is really important, especially as a marketing team, where you have to have those conversations of, like, yes, we're hitting our numbers, but what are we getting out of it? Is it contributing to pipeline? And it's not always fair because marketing doesn't always have a direct impact to pipeline the same way, right? We're not the closers. We're
Right.
the ones that set you up for success, but it really starts from us starting you to set you up for success to the closer. And if you're not closing as much as you anticipated, yeah, there's going to be a you know, response to that. So I think what I learned through this experience is really it's not what's good today, but what's viable tomorrow. I think as a team, you have to have direct sight of what you're doing and how is it tied to the bottom line. Even if you're the email marketer or the event, you know, manager and all these things and product marketer. And I think we've talked about this. I've heard this all the time, right? That it's not just counting your MQLs and hitting that, you know, metric, because it's almost a vanity metric at this point. It's how do you get the dollars
Yeah.
in, and what do you do next to get more
Well, I
dollars
think
in?
this is, yeah, kind of reminds me of something that I recommend for all marketers and marketing ops people, specifically, is if you don't understand how your organization makes money, right? It's going to be really hard for you to have an impact, right? And I think it helps you be strategic. So if you want to be seen as strategic when you're asked to go do something, you should be thinking about it in the context of what's the customer prospect like, what's that experience going to be like, how's this going to help us drive profitable revenue, right? And those kinds of things. And it's just, I don't think a lot of people are have that understanding, particularly in marketing, because your point, to your point, right? The sales teams in B2B context, right? The sales team is typically the one closer to that closing of business. But if you don't understand how that process works, it's going to be hard for you to push back. Um, yeah, it's interesting because I also I struggle with this. I was actually talking, so I've got kids in college now, and I was talking to my older one who's studying finance, which is something I encouraged him to do. But we were talking about the challenge of a lot of enterprises right now, especially public ones. I don't think it's unique to public, but definitely is a public one. Is this focus on short term results, right? Quarterly results as opposed to longer term ones. And I think
Yeah.
it also leads to decisions that are, you know, seen as positive in the short run, but not always in the long run. And I think that's, I don't know that I have a great answer for it or a solution for it, because I think it's so embedded now into, you know, how people evaluate organizations. But it's a tough one. I mean, that's so. I mean, but at the same time, right? It's not to say you can't ignore patterns, right? So to your point, like if there were quarterly, quarter over missed goals, um, it's interesting though that MQLs continue. It's you think that I hear a lot of people talk about pipeline should be more of a pipeline revenue should be marketing's kind of joint goal with the rest of the organization, sales in particular. But I still see jobs posted where for marketing roles where one of the key metrics is to drive MQLs or or if it's in marketing elsewhere,
Hmm.
right, build attribution models, which all sort of point to a continuing view that that's marketing's job is to do MQLs and that's it.
Hmm.
Are you seeing the same
Yeah.
thing?
Well, and I think, oh yeah, no, it's again, it's that siloed box of like, I just need you to drive this thing, and then you pass the baton, right? And then the next team takes over. And I think there's some reasons for that, right? Because you have, it's, when you start diversifying that relationship, then you have more owners who are
Yeah.
responsible, right? And then it becomes a little bit muddier of like, well, we can blame, not blame, but
No,
you
but
get
that's
what
what
you
that's the way it's
you
used,
can,
right?
yeah, you can point the finger at this person because you're not closing here. We hit our numbers. We're having drop off here. It must be this part of the org that needs to fix some stuff, right? But as we all know, customer journeys aren't linear and the experience
No.
isn't linear. So, I think that's the conundrum that we're kind of in right now, of refining that experience and making everybody accountable at each step of the way in the right
Yeah.
context.
Well, so I mean, I brought up attribution here just because it's commonly used,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, I have my own sort of view about, I have sort of a love-hate relationship with the concept of attribution, but like, what do
Don't
you
we all?
think is working well, or what do you think is broken about the way most organizations
Yeah.
use or kind of look at attribution?
So I think, in theory, attribution should make decisions faster and easier to understand. In reality, that's true half the time, maybe if we're lucky, right? And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. When you start thinking about things, I kind of see where you have failure modes of you're either over engineered or you're under engineered, with how you go to market with your attribution. So I think with over engineered, usually it's one or two people that have crafted this awesome strategy. It's in a black box. Sometimes it's slow to update or, provide visibility, and it's hard for leadership to understand sometimes. And people that are not technical in the weeds, it's hard for them to understand. The other side that you might have is if it's under engineered. So you might be missing some data points that are really important, or you don't have that proper pull through. So data gets dropped or data is inaccurate, and inaccuracy is a loose term, right? With attribution, I feel. And the other thing is when you're kind of under engineered, are you doing it like a first touch? Are you doing it a last touch, weighted touch, whatever? But are you tracking it equally the same way in the same process when you're stamping a contact or a lead into an account, into an opportunity? And that's where things start to get a little bit messy. And the real thing I think that organizations need to really consider, that I think they don't understand as much, as the technical side of it. I like to call it the underneath. And I say the underneath because my husband and I got really into
Oh
watching
yeah,
Stranger Things, and he calls the upside down world the underneath. And I was like, oh, this is a perfect
right.
idea. And that's where, like, I feel like our systems are the underneath, where it's chaotic and it's like sometimes people understand it, sometimes people don't. But really, your underneath is kind of that. That's your plumbing of how you get things working, and like a sprinkler system, right? If there's a leak in your pipe in one spot, you may be able to water your grass still, but you have some dead grass here or there. So that's kind of, I think, the important piece that the org needs to understand and support, and they don't always because they don't understand it.
Yeah. I totally agree. What I would add to this is I think often attribute attribution is used um, to communicate like an ROI kind of thing, or it's a attempt at getting credit. Um, but I
Hmm.
think because of the nature of the complicated math, and it almost doesn't matter if you have a relatively simple model or a more complicated model, they're all complicated for most people. And to your point, right, they often miss key things for a variety of reasons, right? Um, but I think I would, yeah, when I would advise marketing leaders to not, if they can avoid it, like don't talk about that with senior leadership because they don't care. I don't think they
Yeah.
believe
Oh
it.
yeah, 100%.
Um, Now, do I think it should be thrown out completely? No, I do think there's value in it as long as you do it whatever way you do it, right? Pick a way, be consistent about it, and do it over time,
Hmm.
and use it to inform what you're doing within marketing, but not necessarily outside of marketing, right? I believe that storytelling is a stronger thing outside of the organization, right? Looking at examples of opportunities or deals that were won recently, and then telling the story about how we won, right? And it's a
Hmm.
joint thing across all the parts of the organization that had an impact on that deal, right? From marketing to sales to legal who were reviewing contracts to like whatever, right? I mean, there's a whole bunch of players that could have been part of it. And I think that, in my experience, has been much more compelling outside of marketing to talk about it that way. So
Yeah, well, and I think there's a simplicity of it too, and not to dumb it down, but I think the higher up you get in the org, you're asking more direct questions with the answers should be simple, right? Like what campaign performed the best? That's an easy question. How you answer it, and when you get into the weeds like we do, not so
yeah,
easy, right? Well, it depends. Are you looking at first touch? I don't care. I just want to know how the campaign's performing, right? That's the right
yeah.
question. We don't have to go further than that, right?
Yeah, and we've had a couple of like senior like CMO, CRO type people on recently who basically said like at that level, no one cares that you're busy because everyone's busy, right? They want to know what
Yeah.
the outcome was, not the outputs, if
Yes.
you will, right? So
Hmm.
that's interesting. So you mentioned the idea of over engineered, under engineered. Um, but, do you lean towards using simpler versions of these models or more complex? And what's the trade-off that you think about in terms of that and the cost that goes with something that's more complex, maybe?
Yeah, so I think I lean more into I have to constantly remind myself to not over engineer because I think in what
Guilty
we
as
do, it's
charged.
really easy to do that. Right. Well, because it's like we're we're not just dealing with one system. We're dealing with like five plus, right? Then we're dealing with five different objects that we need to be tracking consistently the same way. Then God knows how many workflows we have to build on top of that to make it
Right.
happen, right? Systematically in a scalable way. So it's really easy to over engineer. But I think to me, from a simplicity perspective, I've had a lot of fun looking at trying to build a comprehensive story through one object if you can. And maybe that's me over engineering it, but simplifying it at the
Yeah.
same time.
I get what you
So,
mean though.
um, yeah, well, and that's where like I personally I think an underrated object is the campaign member object in Salesforce because you can track leads, contacts, and accounts on
Yep.
that, right? And when you're building reports in Salesforce, it gets really convoluted of like, well, I'm only looking at this lead report, so I don't know the number. Oh, I'm looking at this contact account report. And so that's how the story starts to disintegrate because you're not looking at one universal
Right.
spot, and then it gets complex.
Yeah.
So
The way I think about is when things get complicated, I think about it in the context. I used to say just like a chain, and it has whatever link is the weakest one is the place where it's gonna can break. But it's really more like a web of chains, right? What we have today,
all those
and
daisy
any
hooks.
one of those links breaks, and I don't necessarily mean literally breaks, but there's a place where something can get go wrong. you've got, say you've got a process that normalizes a field some way, but you get some value you don't expect. And, up until now when AI can maybe help do some of that in a smart way, right? Now you've got a place where it can break.
Mhm.
And it's all these things and this is
Yeah.
like part of why people don't trust the data that we report out on, because they see anomalies like that because we're pattern
Yeah.
recognition animals, right? When something's outside of the pattern, it's very obvious.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, it's kind of how you're going about it too. Again, I honestly, I could maybe care less about the marketing models. Like weighted's fine to me.
Yeah.
It's fine. I think we get into problems when we start doing first touch versus last touch a little bit, only if your first touch is something different on the lead versus the account versus the opportunity. That's not first touch to me, right? So I think, the best way for me to simplify these things is really have some streamlined pick list values across your key data sets. I think you can have some free for all data sets, but that's more, I'd say, a macro level versus a
Yeah.
macro. And that's where AI can help you, streamline that, clean it up. But really doing that, because I've seen some things where it's like, oh, we'll do concatenated fields, which that's where data I feel like goes to die. Maybe that's my hot take, but they're great in theory. They really are. But in the end, it's like, oh, how can I actually report on this? Right.
Yeah. I, however you concatenated it, it's going to generate something that's confusing. Yeah. It's usually a
Yeah.
sign that there's
Yeah.
something broken, whether it's an understanding or just data or process or whatever. Um, but
Yep.
we've all done it, right? We've all done it at some point.
We've
So,
all done it.
um,
Yep.
so when you started at StarTree, um, what was, I mean, kind of in all this context, right? What did you discover in terms of infrastructure, tracking, measurement, attribution,
Yeah.
and what were you able to do to try to, assuming there are some challenges, because I think everybody says that when they deal with something new, but like, what were you able to do?
Yeah, so I think there's been some interesting data sets or data pieces to track down across the tech stack because we have a really, really great tech stack. I also think coming on, there was some campaign work that needed to be done and really more around the campaign member object and the campaign parent-child hierarchies, which I don't really feel like there's a blueprint out there on like the best approach for campaign
I'm not a
hierarchies.
big
So
fan.
it's
I'm not a
always
big
like,
fan because
just
same like where you're going to go, right? They always break down at some point, but
right. And so it's kind of like, that's a missed opportunity. I will say, like, maybe my personal experience is I feel like campaign member statuses, though they could get overwhelming, that's a missed opportunity because you can track consistently, did someone engage? Did they convert? I even have, if I can, and I try not to over engineer this, but did they opt out? Right. And how are you stamping that against the life cycle, right? This person's an MQL, you can stamp that on the campaign member and you have that story across the
yeah.
tech stack. Again, I feel like it's complex to get there, but that's to me the holy grail to get the answer quick and easy. I think the other things that we did or that I was able to do some cool stuff. I don't know if you've ever played around with like campaign walloper, but that
Campaign
was
what?
like a really easy way. Walloper?
Campaign Walloper. I am not familiar with this.
Yeah, it
Enlighten me.
Yeah, because like I think, yeah, yeah. So I feel like the pushback of like, I don't want to use campaign member statuses because I have to recreate the wheel every time, right? With campaign Walloper, you set your statuses, they're consistent across your different record types, and you can do it easily in one spot where you don't have to build a bunch of workflows or logic around. So it might be fun to check out. I've had a lot of fun with it,
So it's like some sort of
and that's made
it's
my
like
life
some
a
sort
lot
of
easier.
technology that plugs into, I assume, Salesforce, maybe HubSpot, CRM.
Yeah, so it's on the Salesforce side. It's basically it's a
I
plugin or
forget what
like,
they're called.
a
Yeah.
package. It's a
Okay.
package, if you will. And I think what they do is they create kind of like two or three behind the scenes lookup objects, right? But really what you're able to do is tie and update. I have consistent campaign member statuses based off of the record type and the channel or medium that I'm trying to
Oh,
track.
okay. Interesting.
So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
anything that can enable consistency and automate stuff that otherwise
Yeah.
relies on humans. that can be done on an over and over basis. Like I'm a big fan of that. So
Yeah, and the other fun hack that I got, if we're getting really
yeah,
nerdy, because I hope you want to get nerdy with me, is I was able to build some Apex. I had my developers do it. I'm sorry if you're not with a developer, but basically we were able to automate campaign naming structures on the Salesforce side. So I'm able to say this is like the baseline how I want to name the campaign, and I have like 3 or 4 main fields that I use every time, like start date, channel, medium, whatever, asset type, and it automatically shoots out a campaign name on the other side, which has been really fun and really easy to work
and it's
with.
directly inside Salesforce. So I've
Mm-hmm.
never done
Yeah.
that, but I worked with a project management system years and years ago that's kind of purpose built for, it's not a big well-known one. I don't even know if it's still around. It's one that this is not meant to be a plug for anybody, but Aquint, the agency, had some technology. They sold one. It was RoboHead was the name of the platform. It's very rudimentary project management, but one of the cool things that was cool is every time we had a tactic we did, we put it in there, we put in all the core information about it. It would generate um, we could generate names for all the different, like the campaign name, an email name, uh, yeah, and we used all the same naming stuff, and so it was really convenient because it was always there. And then that
Yeah.
became actually the starting point for when we did reporting, is we used the list from project management system. We could go tactic by, and we had a campaign basically for every tactic, even if they were part of a
Yep.
kind of a bigger, kind of say, I would even say multi-channel, but just like a campaign that was made up of more than one tactic. We could keep it all. We could do it
Mm-hmm.
together, and the naming convention was convenient enough that we could pick up, say it was a webinar. So we had the webinar itself. We had the emails that were part of it to promote it, the follow-up emails, like they all had some consistency to it. Um, but we still were like copying and pasting that into marketing automation platform or CRM, et cetera, et cetera. But um, yeah, but I like that. Like there's some nice stuff
No,
about that.
that's the solution. And yeah, no, now I want that what you have so I can do it across the entire tech stack, because that would be a
Yeah,
lot easier across assets and
yeah. It
campaigns.
was. It was.
So AI can do that, I'm sure. We'll get
I'm
there.
like I don't even know that you need AI. I mean, you could probably accomplish a lot of the same stuff with the kind of thing that a lot of people do with a spreadsheet to do UTM parameters, right?
Yep.
And in
Yep.
fact, you could use the same
100%.
spreadsheet to do your asset naming, right? It's just a matter of plugging it all in, and then make sure people don't overwrite the formulas. um,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
so that's interesting. By the way, I don't remember the name of it, but something that I recently learned about with Salesforce. There's another. I'm just calling it generically a plugin because I never remember what the right terms are in Salesforce for things like this. But there's one that I found that's really interesting. It does some, I don't want to call it intelligent totally, but like some interesting ways of automatically adding contacts to opportunities with roles. Um,
Okay.
and it's supposed to do it automatically. And then there's an opportunity to like review and approve it. And then people can obviously manually do it, but I've never been at a place so I'm really curious to see if that works. And the organization that does it, it seems to be a free one. So at some point I may have
Yeah.
to share
I
it
love
out.
the, yeah, no, I share. I'm going to ask you about this later
Okay,
and see. I
deal,
want to
deal,
see it
deal.
too.
We can do that.
I'll share mine
There
and
we
you share
go.
yours.
Um, okay, so one of the other things we've talked about as well, and I'm a big believer that it's easy to get caught up in the kind of the cool stuff. Sometimes I would call it clever, like overly clever stuff that we can do in marketing or marketing ops. And you said something that I think that resonated with me, which is, we need to get back to the fundamentals of marketing. Now, I know what I think about when I think
Hmm.
about that, but what do you mean by that?
Well, I go real old school, I feel like, and like basic marketing concepts of like the 4 Ps. Yes, I know I'm wild
I mean,
throwing that in
old
there,
people
but
only care
like,
about the 1P anymore.
oh, what's that P? Tell
Promotion.
me. Oh, you think so? Okay, that's fair. No, I believe in that. I
No,
think,
I'm saying that's wrong, but I like that seems to be the only
yeah,
one
yeah.
people think about.
Well, and I was thinking about this too, because I feel like from a MOPS and demand gen perspective, we don't really get to touch product or price, right? That's kind of given to us. But placement and promotion,
Yeah.
we do. Like that's really what we get to do. And I also think those are probably two of the fastest changing things in our environment right now, right? The different tools are changing. The way people want to be marketed to is changing. So
How
there's a
people
lot of
search is
change that you have to
changing.
keep up with. Oh God, yeah. Like, so it's like the fundamentals when you're really coming down to it is you do have to be basic in thinking about like your ICP clarity. Is your offer compelling? Are you talking to people the right way they want to be spoken to right now? And I think with, AI slop out there, people are tired and want to be spoken to a different
Well, I think
way.
personally, I think there was
And
in
as
the
you're,
B2B world as well. There was slop before AI.
it's
Yeah.
always there. Yes. It's just
Yeah.
more
It's
slop,
just they're able to
more like
generate more
easier
slop
to see
faster now.
slop. Right. I noticed that you're using M dashes. That must be slop, right? Easier way to recognize, which I love M dashes. I used them before. I hate that they're not as cool
Yeah.
anymore. Same with emojis. But yeah, so like, going back to like the fundamentals of marketing, really have to have your ICP needs to be clear. You have to have an offer that it's enticing. Your message has to be consistent and repeatable across channels. And then you kind of need that, tight feedback loop to say, is this working? Is it not? And that's, I think, as old school or fundamental as I go back to. Um, the missing ingredient, I feel like today is the context, right? You have to give the right context in the right moment to the
Yeah.
right person.
I mean, to me, getting back to fundamentals, there's things like if you're going to invest in having a booth at a trade show or an event, get the right people there, right? What is your goal? Is your goal to generate leads? Is it to build
Yeah.
awareness? Like, know what you're doing it for, and and then
Mhm.
measure yourself against that, right? If your goal is just, because I know a number of people who's like, yeah, we spend a bunch to go to whatever trade show X, um, and we don't get any leads from it. We very rarely get leads from it, but if we don't show up, people question our viability, right? Because it's the show that everybody has to be at.
Mhm.
Okay, well, if that's the case, right, spend what you have to spend and no more, and don't expect to get leads. But if there's one that you're expecting to get leads on, make sure you have the right people staffing the booth. Because if you have the wrong people, you're not going to get leads, right? And you need people doing like whenever I've worked at a booth, I was or I'd walk like well, I'm always stunned. They send people who just sit there back in the booth on their phones or whatever, and they're not engaging people walking by. I'm like, this is not that hard, right? But if you don't have the right people who won't do that,
It's
you're not
not.
going to get the leads, right?
No, and I think you also deal with like the other side of it too, of like, well, what happens after the event and how do I get leads? What do I do with the leads after,
Yeah.
right? How many days does it take to get a list, put it into your system and actually market people, right? It's too late.
Yep. Totally. Um, and then it's the other one. It's interesting because you brought up the term vanity metrics, and I've started getting back to the point where like there's been this focus of kind of moving to the extreme of everything needs to be, call it data driven, which I hate to some degree, but fine, call it that. To be everything has to have an ROI that we can measure in the short term. And we're going to discount anything that we now call vanity metrics. So web activity, like email opens and clicks, conversion rates on landing pages, things like that. But I still think we should be measuring these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we should be measuring, again, it didn't matter who you talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is not to go out to the rest of the organization, but if I am responsible as a campaign owner for delivering results from a campaign, the things I can control, because I can't, like you said, like if once it gets to a lead becomes handed off to sales, like I need to depend on sales to hold up their part of the bargain. But I can, like, if my promotion for a webinar is not generating the kinds of registrants that we wanted, I should be fixing that, and I need to be paying attention to that immediately. I should know what I expect,
Mm-hmm.
and if I'm not there, like adjust. Like, and I think people have gone so far to thinking about all the way at the end, right? How many MQLs are we going to lead and influence on pipeline, et cetera, that they forget they're like there's core fundamental execution that we need to be monitoring and holding ourselves accountable for, and not focusing on that because it's now considered a vanity metric.
I would challenge you too and ask like, how do you feel about looking at it from like a reverse waterfall perspective?
So company has a goal of X amount of revenue. We expect that means we need to have the X amount of pipeline coverage, whatever the number is, 3x, 4x, 5x. And then to get that, we expect that we need X number of MQLs that will convert to like that, like working backwards to like, okay, now
Yeah,
marketing
yeah,
needs to generate X number of like,
yeah.
I hate it. Uh,
You do. Well, no, because that's where I'm like, that's where I feel like vanity metrics at the top of it actually kind of come
yeah.
into play, right?
So I
Like, what's my
so I
volume?
think I think the when I say I hate it, I don't hate it. You're right. So I
It's okay.
I
It's okay
don't
if you hate
mind
it.
that model, but I've been at a place like my reaction was very much like I was at an organization where that was very much the way that marketing's goals were set. And at some point, like when the thing at the end, right, revenue goes up by like the percentage, right? When you go backwards, right, whatever the multiplier is, that's you're expected to generate this volume. Marketing can very well probably generate the volume of stuff from their work, but is it all like the quality is probably going to go down, right? Like, and it's going to be expensive
Mhm.
to get the incremental one. My the reason I say I don't like it is because I think this is kind of getting back to like how should we be measured jointly with sales? It should be pipeline revenue, right? So I do believe that like we need to agree on what the pipeline coverage we have. We need to have the predictable revenue coming out of it. But I would rather be held accountable to the pipeline. And if I believe that yes, a waterfall model works, and I need it like, and that's the way that we're going to generate that, fine. But if we believe like um, a different kind of, well, maybe it's a mix of waterfall, but like, or what I need to do is I need to invest more in certain, like really focus in on key customer personas or things like that. And it's going to be more expensive for that, but I'm going to do lower volume, but generate higher quality that's going to more likely to convert. I would rather do that. Like, so hold me accountable for the outcome, not
Yeah, yeah,
necessarily
yeah, yeah.
just a raw number of MQLs. Does that make sense?
No, and I think that's no, and I think you need to be doing that when you're looking at a reverse waterfall to do it effectively, right? And that's where you start looking at like your channel mixes again in the vanity metrics of like if you're not getting bites on certain channels or certain campaigns and you're trying to target, and this is who you're going after, um, then you have to start thinking about the vanity metrics, I think, a little bit and against the waterfall. But you have to do in the right, like, am I segmenting proper? Am I getting the right people in? Is the message right? Right back to the core principles, right? On the persona and the offer. That's I think where like the vanity metrics might be important to be aware of and understand against your
Yeah, I think you're saying the
personas.
same thing because this is why I've gone back to the now commonly called vanity metrics are where we have control as marketers really, and we need to be willing to like. I see a lot of organizations. I went through like a decision making sort of mini MBA class years ago at another company where we had access to a lot of these sort of MBA courses in say a couple of weeks, right? And one of them was a decision making one, and it's the whole like I see organization after organization after organization making decisions on what I would call the sunk cost fallacy, right? So I've already spent X amount of dollars, like we can't stop investing in this. We need to continue investing in it. But when it's clear it's not working, like that money's gone, you can't get it back, right?
Yeah,
Generally
no,
speaking,
it's
right? There
gone.
might be some contractual stuff where like you could recover
Yeah.
some of it, but generally it's gone. So making a decision on what we've already spent is not the way to approach it. It's like you got to go like, will the additional investment yield the results we want? And I think that's where a lot of organizations fail. And I think the same thing can apply to this is why I believe that like too many marketers are moving so quickly that they're not stopping and going, even at a high level, going like, I'm going to do this tactic. I expect the outcome to be a raw number of whether it's leads, registrants, whatever the thing is, page views, like all like those are not immaterial because if you
Mhm.
believe that your effectiveness at those things ultimately does move prospects and customers through the funnel, um, the more you can make each one of those points in time more effective, there's a multiplier effect, hopefully, right? So if you do believe that there's a little bit of a funnel, although I don't believe it's a straight funnel anymore, to your point earlier, I do think there needs to be a re-emphasis on those things, right? So, hey, we tried these paid search ads. We're spending a ton of money and not seeing any click-throughs. Well, that's just a vanity metric. Well, bullshit, right? It's money going out the door. It's like there's
Right.
doesn't
Right. It's a lot of
so
money.
either change the tactic, stop it, like especially with those where you don't have to commit to a long term. We should be looking at those every
Hmm.
day and or every day, every week,
Yeah.
whatever the time frame is, and being like truly critical, thinking about. I bring this up a lot. There's a book that I got again years ago, same company where I was got access to that MBA type training. Um, a speaker who came in was promoting his own book, but it's called How to Be a Marketing Superstar, and it's a very like pithy kind of short chapter book. If for those people who know Who Moved My Cheese, it's kind of in that vein. But I always tell people there's this one chapter that is like stuck in my head ever since, and it's one chapter is 2 pages, facing pages, and it says this is customer money, and it basically the point is everybody's paycheck should say this is customer money, right? And it's the it's kind of like a cheesy thing to say, but like the point was none of us have jobs without customers paying us for whatever product or service we're selling. But it also, to me, it reinforces the idea like we need to be good stewards of the money we spend too.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that, like, I think you talked about it, like there's a lot, like marketers sometimes don't think about the full picture of what they're spending on because they think, oh, like, oh, it
Yeah.
just
Oh
costs,
yeah.
it just, this is how much an event costs, right? This is how much it costs to uh, pay someone to do a photo shoot, right? Like, and I'm not saying those aren't important things, but like really like being conscious about like, should I really spend that money is something I see a lot of marketers not doing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that kind of comes back to like we just talked about where um are you burning more to get that prospect, right? To get that MQL, that opportunity. And if so, like is it viable, and is it worth it? And I think to your point, we don't always think about it as marketers that way. And we should. Orgs think that way. They make decisions
Yeah.
on it at some point. We probably
Yeah.
should too.
I mean, the financial viability of the enterprise matters, right? So that's why like I've kind of gotten away from like,
Yeah.
and I think this is where the market is now. There was I think a period of time 5, 10 years ago where growth at all costs was kind of the model, especially for startups.
Yeah.
And I think it's
Yeah.
now shifted very significantly to profitable growth is the key.
Yes.
And
100%. Yeah.
probably where it should have been. But that's like, so if you don't have that mindset of being critical about what you're spending money on, you should. So,
Yeah. Nope. And that's kind of where we're at
so
right now
we're
too,
just going to
is how
solve
we think
all
about
this, Ellie.
that.
This is like, this is ours.
World peace and
There you go.
everything.
World peace
We
and
can do
everything.
it. Yeah.
Um,
With tacos and whatever food makes you feel good.
well, we are in Texas, so we do need tacos. Although I had some tamales the other day that were very
Oh,
tasty, so I'll take a tamale too.
oh, okay. I mean, anything
There you
Tex-Mex,
go.
I'm in.
I'll share this surprising place later when we're done.
Okay. Awesome. I'm in.
Okay, so on the one hand, we're talking about fundamentals or like getting back to fundamentals is important. Obviously, like AI is all over the place now. Like, how do you see AI playing into that? Um, like maybe again, like what do you see as potential positives and what concerns do you have?
Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of upside, right? I mean, from creation, which I don't know if you've been playing around with Nana Banana, but I did this week and it
Nano
was
banana.
fun.
What's
Um,
that? I don't even know it.
yeah, it's like it's the new Gemini image tool.
Oh,
And like it
I
was a
did see something
project.
about that. Okay.
Yeah. And you've probably seen bananas everywhere and all kinds of
Okay.
creative. That's kind of the genesis of that. So, playing around with creation and how we're translating not just like the static images, but making video. That's really cool. Insights. I've actually had some fun with HubSpot and being able to summarize data about a record, like, hey, what drove this person to become an MQL? What's important for my sales team to know? Don't get me started. We already talked about the 0 clicks with AEO. That's amazing. And then from the ops side, I've had a lot of fun making custom agents for myself, AI agents, looking at summaries, trying to build some templates and then get AI to, basically do templates for me. My next code to crack is I just upload or say, hey, give me a brief for this next campaign. That's my awesome comprehensive brief, and it does it. But what I would say from a concern perspective, your typical boilerplate of security and data integrity and all that stuff. But what I'm not seeing AI do a phenomenal job at is the context and the scalability piece. And that's what I'm hoping that will get resolved hopefully in the next year or so. And when I say scalability, because I feel like there's been a lot of conversations around scalability, automation versus AI, and how people are jumping to AI to do the automation or do the scalability. But I think it does scalability in these one-off scenarios. Like, I have this one content brief, I need you to build it out. And it changes over time because, again, with Gen AI, you're looking at patterns and how to track it over time, and it's morphing from what you originally wanted to do. Now, if you're trying to build 5 campaigns at once with the same kind of framework and the same messaging, that's a little hard to scale, especially with imagery too. Like, I did this, I was trying to make some isometric icons all looking the same. I wanted 30. That seems pretty small to me. Struggled really hard getting that output over time. I have very mixed results
with image generation and AI tools.
Yeah. I think it's there's some, and I've played around with like Midjourney, Nana Banana, even ChatGPT, and Ideogram was another one I played with. But what I've seen, again, that scalability piece of it and the context, and I feel like scalability and context go hand in hand, where AI is great creating things for you, but it doesn't give you the right, easy to read context, especially for consumers. Like, why does this matter for this ICP person? Is the messaging aligned to what really matters to them? And can you scale it? And those are the two things that that concerns me, or that I want to see worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm generally bullish, but I've found that the one thing I don't think I would ever do right now is just completely let it run and not have me interpret the output and adjust it. There have been times when it's been good, but it's usually it's on multiple iterations of stuff, and over time it gets better and better as long as I continue to provide history and context. But yeah, it was interesting. I was talking to somebody total different context who is a writer, and they happen to do they break news stories, and I didn't realize that until we were talking. But at the end of the conversation, I said, "What do you think about these tools?" Because most of the writers I know really don't like them, especially like those who like to use M dashes, right? But I know, and now you can't, because then you're questioned all the time, right? But it was interesting. This person said, AI is not really going to replace what we do because it needs stuff to create on, and we're breaking new stuff, right? So we're the ones creating the stuff that eventually it might use. And so I think that's the other part of this. Like, I don't know that they're quite to the point, at least I haven't seen it yet, where they can be like really creating truly new stuff, right? I think it feels like that for some of us because it's new to us, but not really new, right? Because it's a new idea maybe, or a different way of thinking about things. And I do appreciate that, but that's not truly new. So I think there's some work. It will not surprise me if someone were to come back and say, like, actually, this is my experience and it's different, or in, a year from now or 2 years from now or 6 months from now that changes, so.
Yeah. Well, and what I've seen really interesting too is a lot of products with AI capabilities in there again, that's where the context is really falling flat of like they have these rigid models. And I've had talks with like product experts on, different
Hmm.
tools. And they're like, yeah, you're not getting the output that you want all the time because our model framework is pretty strict. So like that's the customability that I think needs to start happening too. Because I think, depending on if you're a really niche market, a very technical tool, there's certain nuances and things that you have to do or say, besides like writing link or writing rules or tone
Yeah.
of voice, and that's something that hopefully I think we'll start seeing that with products that have AI capabilities within them. We'll
Yeah.
start seeing.
All right. Let's cover one more topic, kind of in the same vein as like fundamental stuff. And this is one that kind of going back to fundamentals, not the four Ps, but this idea that retaining customers generally is way cheaper than acquiring new customers. That I think that's still the belief. At the same time, yeah, I think a lot of companies again are still focused on acquisition. Um, so
Mm-hmm.
why do you think that there's if for us, tell me if I'm wrong here, but my perception is that's the case, right? Why do you, if that's the case, like why do you think there's not as much focus on retention and customer marketing? And do you think that might start changing?
Yeah, well, I think that shift is already happening. And I think some orgs are really starting to prioritize, to your point, it's really expensive to get a new lead in. I think that, maybe it was a stereotype of I've already won the business. Why do I have to keep like selling the business once it's won? I also think the other side of it that you see is like, again, we're still really siloed in how we do things. So it's like marketing's mostly, unless you have a specific team dedicated to customer marketing, you're really more focused on new logos and
Yeah.
everything. And then I think the other attitude of an org is, well, I'm paying, sales and customer success to drive the business after the fact. So they should be doing that. I shouldn't need marketing to really come in as that, support mechanism. I think if you're a bigger org, like an enterprise business, you have the budget to start investing more in customers and customer marketing. But if you're not, again, you have to
Yeah.
prioritize, and you're prioritizing the fish that you need to catch versus the fish you have on your
Yeah.
plate, right? Because you already have
Yeah.
it.
What is it?
So
A
that's kind
bird
of
in the
my,
hand is better than whatever the number is in the bush, right? That's what's the saying.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, 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 yeah.
I mean, it's funny because I think about being on the flip side of that. I can think of at least one scenario in particular that is in my head right now where I had this vendor. They were going to raise prices. Like the costs were continuing to go up because the model was very much volume driven, and for whatever reason, it just kept going up and up. And it was a shared license across multiple business units. It was a big organization that I worked at the time, and um, it was coming up on renewal. I don't know, 3 to 6 months out, right? And we had I can't remember how, like it was ahead of when we had to sign a renewal or opt out. And I was like, hey, this is getting too expensive. Like, what can you do? And initially they just ignored it. And so I started pursuing, there weren't many competitors for what they did, but there was at least one major one. And so I reached out to them. I was like, hey, talk to me what we can do. And became convinced pretty much that, like, from my perspective, the alternative was going to be a much more affordable and maybe actually better option for us. But I had to get people on
Mm-hmm.
other business units that had a hand in this. I think we're used to what it was, and I kept giving the incumbent vendor opportunities to try to match or like even come close, and they
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just did nothing, right? Like almost ignored it. And I think it stuns me when I see that happen because it's like I get it, right? Maybe there's your financial model doesn't make sense if you go down below a certain price or whatever, and fine, okay, say it. I don't care, but like not even responding and
Yeah,
not like, and maybe the person's hands were tied, fine, whatever. But it was like that experience. I
yep,
was like, how do you? It's like walking away, and I remember like it wasn't even a big contract, but let's just like something is better than nothing to some degree. and
Yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
that's not totally true. Like I get that, but in this case, I think it would have been.
Well, well, and I think like that creates like so much damage to your brand too, because now you have someone, your win back. Well, good luck winning that
Yeah,
customer back, right? Which is probably the most expensive thing to get. Maybe
yeah,
I'm wrong, but you have that, and then those people share their sentiment, right? Which you know how detrimental negative sentiments can be. So it's an important thing, but again, I think because we're so linear and so siloed, still, it doesn't get prioritized because people don't know what to do with it, and then they're just kind of like, they'll renew or they
yeah,
won't, right? We'll send them an email,
yeah,
maybe.
yeah. It's just like it's still like I'm still like thinking about it again. Like I just like I don't understand not not engaging.
Yeah, but I think, but to your point, I think orgs are shifting to see that that's an easier low hanging fruit to get, and they're starting to prioritize. I'm seeing that in some orgs that I'm talking to or involved with. So I think it's a trend that we're going to start seeing more and
Yeah,
more, especially as leads become more difficult to
yeah,
convert.
for sure. Anyway, well, hey, listen, this has been a lot of fun. We probably didn't even cover everything we could have with you. So first up, thanks for sharing your story.
It's okay.
That was it was a lot of fun and a good conversation. If folks want to go deeper with you or learn more about what you're talking about, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'm generically on LinkedIn. I can definitely post more, but I'm always a message away and love getting nerdy. Marketing ops meetings. I'm a chapter
That's
lead, so
right.
whoop whoop. If you're in Dallas, we also do. We have some virtual events, so you can always infiltrate. All are welcome. So that's probably how you find me and talk to
That's
me.
good.
So
Yeah,
I'm
that's right.
around.
Yeah. So Ellie is the chapter lead for marketingops.com for Dallas, Dallas Fort Worth, really, I guess, but mostly Dallas. Well,
Yeah, yeah.
well, again, thank you. Thanks to all of our supporters, longtime, new listeners, viewers, all of the above. We appreciate the support. If you have ideas for topics or guests or want to be a guest, like Elliot was, reach out to us. We'd be happy to talk to you. Until next time, bye, everybody.